Hi everyone, ErnieTech here, and I have something that I think is very special, something that I've been working on with two friends of mine for quite a while now, and it is a way for us to get into Gopherspace from the 3270 BBS. And what we've done is created a proxy system, a method of having a proxy intermediary between Gopherspace and the TN3270 environment. So what is Gopher and why is it relevant to what we're doing? Well, Gopher is something that was created, oh gosh, back in the early 90s. Let me just show you here a little quick blurb. And it is a very simple way of presenting information to give people access to files and links and all sorts of stuff through a very simple menu type of interface. It's not like the web, it's not like the HTTP protocol. There's nothing except text, and it is managed or created by a bunch of files called Gopher maps. And what a Gopher map is just a text file that explains to the client how to view or how to read what's being presented from the back end being the files and the links and so on. I believe this was created at the University of Minnesota back in the early 90s, and it's kind of like a campus-wide system. It was very altruistic in the way it worked. The same kind of philosophy that, for instance, Music SP had up at McGill, where you had access to things like class schedules and so on. Well, anyway, this grew, and it created a pre-web or a pre-HTTP environment for people to get access to things. And I thought it'd be a lot of fun because, after all, it's text. It is still relevant. It still functions. There's still a lot of Gopher servers out there that are providing up-to-date information. And you don't deal with things like cookies and JavaScript and, I don't know, all the stuff that you get sick and tired of looking at on the actual web that we know today. And so this is retro computing, but it's definitely a lot of fun. And I think it fits right in with our BBS environment. Okay, so you can look that up, go into the interwebs, go into Wikipedia. That won't hurt you. Go to Wikipedia, and you'll see a lot about how this works. Okay, what did we do? What was the method here? Well, let me show you. We used a couple of things. We used a couple of things for the final product, which is not final at all, and one thing at least for figuring out if this could work. And there is the Go3270 environment from Matt, which is Racing Mars on GitHub, and that is the tools that Moshix uses to create the BBS, so 3270 BBS environment. It creates the environment that we can create screens, function keys, the things that we use on the BBS. The other thing was there is an actual Gopher protocol, or Gopher access, or Gopher whatever you want to call it, package in the Go site by ProLogic. And what we did was we grabbed that, we looked at the examples, we pulled things off of GitHub, ran them to see how they worked. They worked, but they weren't very useful, at least because we had already set up a methodology for doing things similar to this in the mud game that we created, in the RSS reader that we created, and other things. We've already done this. We've created these proxy servers, and that's really what they are. They're proxy servers. Each one of these things that seems like a client is actually a server, and it's actually running on a given port on my VPS. And that proxy server is what's acting as the intermediary. And more coffee here. Today is hot coffee in the morning and cold coffee in the afternoon. Hold on. And I have two mugs. Bing. Yeah, you know the story. Hey, one guy mentioned, he said on my the YouTube page, something about it must be a bear being addicted to caffeine. Well, the AARP has done a little thing on one of its magazines about the benefits of coffee. So there. If it wasn't for this, probably none of this would get done. So I'm living with it. Okay. The other thing is that just the standard stuff that you use in Gopher, or in Go, the standard library. So you can. Anyhow, so not a lot to it really. What was well? This is what you do. Initially, we pulled down the information from Gopher just to test it out. that was what we used. We just changed things for the local environment. Let me explain this. This is right from ProLogic on the GitHub site. It just sets up a little listener at the website, and it this is the way it works. You preface it. Gopher prefaces it with Gophers. Actually, it says Gophers. I think that's not supposed to be Gophers. I think it's supposed to be Gopher. Anyway, same thing with FTP and things like that. It's just the way it tells the protocol. It tells the handler how to deal with that protocol, and then the actual IP address, and then the port number. The port number for Gopher is really 70, and I've already opened up some UFW stuff for 70. All the things that we run are in the higher levels for the privileges, so we don't run much down below unless they're standard stuff. So 70 is the standard. Anyhow, all this thing does is just say hello world in response, so that was pretty easy. You know it works. All right, but the 3270 library is what we use for the most part because we already figured it out. And we figured out how to populate screens, and we figured out how to get a command line environment, and we just kind of figured it out. And we figured out how to create pages so you can use F8 and F7 because there are things out there that you can use as the examples, and why not? That's what GitHub's for. So that's kind of it. We use the standard stuff. So, in case you don't know, and it took me a long time to get this down. A couple of friends of mine had it down pretty quick, but what you have to do is you have to create a screen to talk to a 3270 environment, at least through a batch system. Now, you don't have to do this, and we don't, but it's an easy way to put information up on a 3270 terminal. And this thing here, you'll see, is just the way in which you enter in which Gopher host you want to access. By default, it uses a Gopher host called FloodGap. And FloodGap is a Gopher host that has been available for decades, running on a Mac in California, run by a doctor. I think he's like I don't know. He's a very big, well-known doctor somewhere in California, and his side thing is doing retro computing, which is very cool. So that's what you have to do. You have to populate these screens. You have to get information from the source, which is your Gopher host, and then you have to proxy it. Put it up into a way in which it can be seen on the 3270 environment with its character set, or with its the way it processes, not ASCII but EBCDIC, and that's what happens. So that's kind of how the code all works out, and a lot of helper functions, loads of helper functions down at the bottom. I think we're up to about 15 helper functions so far. Okay. What does a Gopher map look like? All right, inside of a Gopher server, in the directories where all the information is served from, there is a Gopher map. And the Gopher map is a text file with no extension on the end, just Gopher map. And you put in manually using Notepad++, VI, Vim, whatever you like, all the information that explains what is being seen and what you are being told is going to be seen if you choose a certain menu item. So in this case here, and we got this from QUUX, there's a World CIA Fact Book. I think it's actually pretty old. It's being served from this server, that port, which is 70 in the Gopher world. It's of type 1, which means that it's going to show you, the actual document itself, I believe, and then you have the 0, which will present a text file. So if there's a text file in there, it'll present that as text. Again, the different port, the different host. Down here is an I, so anytime it sees an I, it just says this is for information. And there's nothing associated with it, so much for the fake null and 0. I'm not sure why it says fake, but whatever. And this is a kind of equivalent to the way an HTTP file descriptor is written. But you notice there's nothing in here. There's no embedded JavaScript. There's no CSS for formatting. There's nothing. It's just it. And it's fairly complicated. There's a lot of things you can do, but I think for the most part, people don't go that route. They kind of keep it as simple as possible. And so every time the server presents, a person goes to that server using their Gopher client, it will present whatever in the directory, whatever the resources are, whatever it is it wants you to see, based upon what's in the Gopher map. So that's how it works, and it's elegant. It's actually very cool. So how does it work in our instance? Well, let me show you. Let me just drag it over here. All right, there is our beloved Moshix 3270 BBS. BBS 3270, whatever. He's got his neat little matrix thing going on here, the screensaver, and we get right here. Now, this is in the extended menu already, so if you're familiar with this, you know that there's an extended menu, and one of the things you have is the doors. And it's reminiscent of old BBSs where you had door games and things like that. Hang on a second. A little more cold coffee this morning. Because it's going to be hot today, and then the temperature is going to take a big dive. And I have to go out later on this afternoon for you ham radio operators. There is a big, there's a big contest this weekend for people who like to bounce radio signals off the moon. And the club I belong to does that. And so we're going to get a little more information tonight and play around a little bit before the contest. Anyway, I digress. One of the things that ErnieTech's BBS does is going to be focusing on the ham radio aspects of things and other stuff, but that's one of my other passions, especially now that I'm a retired guy. Anyway, I went off on a tangent. That's what this coffee will do. It puts you on tangents. What other tangent can I go off on now that I've spilled it all over my leg? All right, let's go to the doors. Let's do a Monty Hall. That takes you back, huh? Let's go to door number 4, or actually, doors. So I've done something which I hope pans out, and that is I have created doors that go into all my little things that we've created. And I say I because I'm the one handling this. We being the little team of people that have worked on these things here. We have the mud game, which I had in a different video, which apparently is actually kind of cool. I'm going to expand that. Space weather, BBS news, BBC news. What I'd like to do is to change that so you can choose a whole bunch of different RSS sources rather than just the BBC. But every time we do something, we get better. We get a little more familiar with how to do things, and we spend less time beating our head against the wall wondering why it won't work, which is quite a bit of time, to be honest. And we have the portal. So let's go into the Gopher portal. Now, when you do this, it's going to take you right to the flood gap by default, the flood gap Gopher. Takes a second. Boom. So now we're into the floodgap.com, port 70 Gopher over there in California, managed by a prominent doctor who is also a retro computing fan, which is neato. And this is what the thing presents like. All the information you see right there is defined by the Gopher map that he has inside of each of the directories. The Gopher map being a text file with no extension on the end, just says Gopher map. Read it out loud, kind of a text file. Every time you press 8, because we use the AID key features in Matt's library so that we can switch between pages using the F8 key, or they all function this way. I can go up and down and look at all the things that are on this particular Gopher server. And notice that every time I go to a different page, the menu items start at 1 again. So each page just has the menu items at 1 to whatever the top is. So it's not like you start at the very top and there's 10,000 menus. It's one set for each page. Anyhow, so let's go back up to the top here. Here's Flood Gap Systems. Does this Gopher menu look correct? Yeah, sort of. Are you running a bot? Better not be. There's SDF. They had I'm not too sure that's still functioning, but it doesn't matter. Let's go to number 3 right now. And what is getting started with Gopher? All right. You click on that, or you put that in, and it will take you to the next level. So Gopher has an actual literal reason for calling Gopher, because you dig down into deeper and deeper levels, and then you dig back up again. So imagine Gopherholes. There was another thing that said, well, maybe Gophers has to do with because, people who ran and got stuff for things. The Gopher went out and got things for you. Well, I'm not sure it goes out and gets things for you, because there is another service out there called Veronica, which actually indexes Gopher sites. I believe there's 1 or 2 indexes being maintained in Veronica. So there's still an aspect of this that's out there, which is retro computing at its best. But I think it's refreshing, because you're basically getting sick and tired of the world that we have now, where everything follows you around. I'm on a soapbox. More coffee, the usual stuff. So this is how it works. You get into a Gopher site or a Gopher hole, and you just keep on digging. Is a Gopher still relevant? Probably. So can you use your web browser? Why? They do and they can. You shouldn't. For instance, some of the stuff's old. Create your own content, look at the Gopher toy box and examples and all sorts of stuff, things to ponder. The technical specifications for Gopher, for instance, I put in number 3. The protocols, all sorts of ways. For instance, the protocol is actually a text exact. It says how it was written by the University of Minnesota. The Gopher Plus, which are extensions to the Gopher protocol, which I'm not sure were ever implemented. Let's back out of this a little bit. Points to ponder. Yeah, so you can dig into your heart's content, as you can imagine. And there are some other things out there that you can do. And let me see if I can't find them. Let me see. Let me just give me a second here to see if I can locate a couple of things, and you use F3 to back out again to the next level. Yeah, you have to really get into this to just here we go. Let's just try this. Number 1, weather maps and forecasts via flood gap. So that's the first one. So let's go to F8, go down and say current weather for eastern United States, number 3. And there it is. So it is actually going out to a resource that's available on the internet, and it's pulling back the textual data and presenting it here. And I could go and dig around until I find what I want. Philadelphia, 7122. I don't think that makes any sense, but maybe it does. Anyhow, so that's kind of how it works. So now you can understand at least what a Gopher site does and how it works. All right, here I am back at this menu. Oh, before I do that, let me just show you. So I'll do it this way. This is the one that I showed you that I set up the screen through Matt's Gopher3270 environment. So this is the screen that I showed you. This is the actual describer for the screen itself that lets you put in the information you want. In this case here, this is where I would put the host and the port number that I want to talk to. In this case here where it says selector, if you happen to know this site well enough to know that you don't want to be dropped at the root, you can go to whatever directory you want. If it's running on a different port, then you can put that port number in as well. But here's what we did, because it was almost trivial at this point. We create our own little rudimentary Gopher server. So there's actually 2 things running right now. We got a Gopher server running on one port, and I got the Gopher proxy running on another. And all it does is use Matt's 3270 library, a package, and go out there to a regular old TCP environment, parse the data that's coming back, and make it usable, and that's it. But notice here this error, and that's because we have a couple of things that we need to do, one of which is we need to be able to parse the directory on the Gopher map. We haven't done that yet. We also have some problems where rendering the ASCII code. So I think I need to define or somehow define just the basic set of ASCII, because it's getting into the extended range. I think that's the problem. But anyhow, but notice this. Right here I have classic basic games converted to Rex. Now, I did that a while back, where I'm still working on that, where I took David All's 101 basic games from back in the late 70s, and I converted them over to Rex. The simple ones, because I could figure that out. Well, if I want to put them out there for everybody to use in their mainframe environment, I would put them here, go to number 2, and notice that they are not presented very well. In fact, it looks pretty awful. That's because the Gopher map that I wrote is incomplete. It's actually in bad shape. I have to fix that. But you can see what it looks like right off the bat. If I go into number 3, that's what the Gopher map looks like. So it's not rendering properly because I don't have it in a good form. But notice that I for the just informational lines, and this for the text type. So that would present actually a whole text list, and you could cut and paste. But we're not there yet. A lot to do, which I will. And you can go to the next page about ErnieTech. Let me see, I got that there. Yeah, just right up there, and it's just a text file. And then we back ourselves back out again. And that is it. So I think we've achieved something pretty cool. I think so anyway. And then when you press F3, as always, it will take about 10 seconds and then drop you back out to the BBS. So that's the door access to this. So yeah, I think I'm going to expand this. I'm going to work on this myself for a while. Once I get it to a point where I want some testing, we'll put it out there. I'm not going to put the code out onto my GitHub site only because I don't know that I'm confident enough to have anybody start forking it off. It's got too many obvious errors that have to be fixed first. But if you want to play with it, the executable will be there, and I'll put information exactly how to use it. It's really pretty simple. Anyway, there it is. That's the Gopher proxy for 3270, and we can plop it right into our BBS as one of the doors and have a good time with it. All right, kind of fun. All right, thanks for subscribing. If you haven't, please do, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.